Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Stan Weber and I have done college football game day together for almost 2 decades and have been on the radio and been on television in other settings as well, so I really feel like I know him pretty darn well, and you probably feel like you know him pretty well as well because of all his appearances on the radio and television and the Kansas State Network as an analyst. But I like, on Kansas City Profiles, for you to get to know these people even better, aside from their accomplishments, aside from just the mere record books or the mere words that you hear them say on the radio. And for me, it's always a revelation as well, because even if I'm a friend of theirs, as I am with Stan Weber, I don't know little details of their life and growing up and things that made them tick, and that's what we try to do here. Stan Weber was a great athlete from early days in Wichita. He parlayed his all-around efforts into becoming the Kansas High School Player of the Year in all sports after his senior year, as voted by the Wichita newspapers. He was the Kansas Shrine Bowl MVP as well, went on to a career at Kansas State, and then, of course, for years and years has described all of the antics of the Kansas State program as it grew, almost immediately from the time he became the color announcer, and Bill Snyder came aboard just a couple of years later. Let's get to know Stan Weber a whole lot better. It's an interesting story. Stan's a great storyteller. And, of course, because he is such a great storyteller, and you might have guessed this by listening to him on the radio, this will be the first of 2 parts of Stan Weber's Kansas City Profile, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And, Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Get a refreshing change of your expectations of a sports bar and restaurant at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. Matt Llewellyn's welcoming spot at Clinton Parkway in Cassold covers all the bases, like their own handcrafted beers and all the televisions you need for great sports viewing. But it's the large, varied, and delicious menu that stands apart. From a favorite of mine like the awesome ahi tuna appetizer to great sandwiches, outstanding pizza, and truly fantastic entrees, the 23rd Street Brewery has it all. Matt and his friendly staff make it that much more enjoyable. Food until 10, fun until late. The 23rd Street Brewery is a can't-miss stop when you are in Lawrence.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Stan, I don't think I've ever asked this on Kansas City Profiles ever, but do you have a very first memory that any particular thing? I remember my mother coming up and getting me out of a tree when I was 4 years old. That is the first actual memory I have, but many people don't have anything that specific. How about you?
Well, one that wasn't maybe my first that was lasting, though, is I recreated football games many times in the living room, and I threw the ball from one end of the place to the other and went and had to dive to catch the ball. And it was just incredible that I was able to catch it. So naturally, being a future media guy and not knowing it, I had to do an instant replay. So I did it again, but this time I missed slightly. I caught the ball, but my head rammed into the door jamb, and for the first time I had to go get stitches. And my parents weren't too happy that, so you're playing football in the living room, and what? You did it a second time? So I got stitches. But I'd say, one of the very earliest memories I have is growing up, not everybody that I was involved with, especially my parents, had much time to worry about sports, but my grandfather on my mother's side, Ed Jacks, was probably the most like I ended up being. Now, he passed away when I was 11 or 12 years old, but it seemed like I was at his side for so many things. I grew up in Wichita, downtown, and just a block away from Lawrence Stadium, which is now Lawrence Dumont Stadium, and it's always been a baseball mecca right there. And my grandfather would take me to games, and I would sit there and watch triple headers with him. And he told, my mom, of all the grandchildren, he liked going with me because the rest of them wanted to run around and play. And I would sit there and talk about baseball and watch the game. But he actually was a Giant fan and went to St. Louis to watch World Series games when they were the closest team. You can imagine listening to Harry Carey on radio. But when television came into play, I just remember sitting there and he would watch TV, read his newspaper, and have a radio on at the same time. And now, my mom and my grandmother, who lived to be almost 100 years old, they would look and go, uh-oh, I think we see the same thing. So I do remember telling my parents, can I just go out to Grandpa's today, like on a Sunday for football? Because he understands me. And I was really, really small. I could tell he understood me. And for me to sit in my basement and read the newspaper and watch 2 or 3 TVs at the same time, it really is, in a lot of ways, emulating what I saw my grandfather do.
You lived in downtown Wichita until you were about 7 years old, and then your father started his own business. Go through that, and then your move as a very young child out to the quote-unquote suburbs.
Yeah, when I lived downtown, one of the great things in that time, it didn't matter where you lived. No one worried about where the kids were. We knew how to get home to eat lunch at the right time and come home for dinner and stay out of trouble, but we would do all kinds of activities, a few blocks away, but usually involved games or little model cars that we would race, try to do NASCAR. But with Lawrence Stadium down the street a block, the gates would be open, and it wasn't open to the public, but we would work our way down 3, 5 of us at a time and go find the workers there who were doing maintenance activities, critical things like getting the field mowed correctly and raked and all that, and just say, can we jump in? Can we help? And they'd give us a frozen Coca-Cola, that thick bottle. Give us a frozen Coca-Cola, and we thought we'd hit a home run. But the main thing is that we just wanted to be down there. We didn't get to play catch or anything like that. But when the baseball tournaments would come, you had college players who would come, or just good athletes would play on teams like the Liberal BJs were a big deal and would come to Wichita and play. And they didn't have any fancy bat boys or anything, so we would go watch the games, and they would play like 7 or 8 games in a row, and we would go instead of playing and then yell at them, hey, do you need a bat boy? And if they said yes, boom, we popped over and we were bat boys. So there was a great memories to play sports, be around all kinds of different kids. Living down, it was so much fun, so many sports. But one of the key things, Danny, that I was fortunate to experience as a young child, both there, especially there every day, was that all the kids played together, and I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, hanging out with the guys. There were even a 9th grade boy. I can't remember if I was 4 years old when he was 9th grade or whatever, but he would be the ringleader of what the rules were for the basketball game or the football game or whatever we were doing. But everyone played full speed. I don't remember anybody taking it easy on anybody else, so it really helped me because I was playing against high-level competition. When you're a 5-year-old and you see kids 2 years old or 5 years older and up to high school, they may have not been athletic, but they still had so many advantages that my athleticism and normal way, it allowed me to be competitive, play my hardest. For around a bunch of little kids, I wouldn't be able to do anything because you're dominating. But I never experienced that. And then I went to my grandparents, and I experienced the same thing. They lived next door to Ken Canings, who's ended up being a 6'10" basketball player at KU. Danny, I'm sure you met him over in Lawrence, but when I was a little kid, I'd go visit my grandparents in a small town called Garden Plain, west of Wichita, and that's where all my relatives are from, kind of an agricultural, Catholic, German area. We went there, and I'd play basketball against Ken Canings. He's 5 or 6 years older than me, and what's funny is later, my parents moved, you talked about moving. We moved into the Goddard district, and Ken Canings actually moved into the Goddard district. So I actually was able to follow him. He was a superstar basketball player for Goddard when I was a kid, watched him play, and then I ended up going to Goddard as well. But when we moved out there to the Goddard district, really that just means you moved to the western edge of Wichita, had a Wichita address. My life's about Wichita. But Goddard's a town where the school just doubles the population. It's a great place to go to school, but no one really lives in town. So you go drive about 6 miles, experience a great school experience. There's no doubt about it at Goddard. But at the same time, my parents had decided they were going to own their own business, and my dad got into the trash business. He has dyslexia. Academics were not his thing. Didn't go to college. He's a hard worker. And in Wichita, I grew up around people who really worked hard. It didn't matter if they're in an airplane factory or owning their own business. People worked hard. And my dad said, you know what, I think I need to try to have a business. Maybe that way I can make a little bit of money, give it a shot. And he ended up getting into the trash business. So it was a big theme in our life. Myself, my sister, it's 2.5 years younger than me. My brother, 4 years younger than me. The three of us, my two parents, and the trash business was our family.
Right. So that was something that took up a lot of their time, and I know we've talked about this. You had a lot of freedom, a lot of time that your mom was busy, she was working, she's the bookkeeper, your dad's working hard, and you're kind of on your own, just finding things to do.
Yeah, I had a great balance, Danny. I don't know if I could ever set up a better situation. My parents worked together; they were the two leaders of the business. Now it grew over time, and fortunately had success where they had 10 or 12 employees and many trucks working, and it was a bigger thing. But it all started, and it pretty much stayed with my mom would do the bookkeeping and a lot of that work. My dad would do the physical things, working on the trucks and getting out there and hauling trash. But my parents were always together. During the day, they would even see each other multiple times, usually eat lunch together. And so I was in a life where my parents were together all the time. I've never met anybody where you have a man and a woman married who love each other more than my parents or need each other. Their deficiencies are so big in certain areas, and the other one filled it perfectly. You just couldn't design a better mesh. 1 + 1 = 3, but they both say, I need that other person. So I saw my parents together all the time. Now, they didn't shut off business. We'd eat dinner and then back to talking about business. And if we started to drive someplace, we might divert over and look at something for the business. We all knew that. But because they were so focused on survival, I mean, when you run your own business, it's hard. And they were so focused on that, even though they might be 15 feet away from me while they're talking, they weren't worried about me. I mean, they didn't say, hey, you've been practicing up, you're going to be any good at baseball, Little League Baseball is going to start in a year or so. I mean, never talking about it. The old go in the backyard and throw the ball. I didn't need my dad to throw the ball. I had all my buddies. We were all playing sports all the time. So it was really interesting that my passion for sports, my grandfather I mentioned had it in his blood, so I probably have it in my blood. But because it was my thing that I wanted to do it, my sister, my brother, they're not into it that much. They had totally other interests. This was my thing. I was the oldest child, and my parents were very distracted with real-life things. And as long as I wasn't causing any trouble and I was doing what I was supposed to do, the chores or whatever, they said, do your thing. So I always got to make my choices. Now, probably really didn't, but the mindset from 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, whenever you kind of catch on to who you are, what you wanted to be, I decided at that time. I mean, I really felt in control. I never lived up to my parents' standards. They never told me what they wanted from me. They let me choose, and either creates a monster or empowers me, whatever. But it's worked very well my whole life because I knew right at the beginning that you had to believe in yourself. You have to live with the fact that you're not great at certain things and take the heat for that. Even if society says you should do something, if you have a different attitude about it, you've got to be real to yourself and move on. And, that worked well for the rest of my life because, when you talk about adversity, everybody has adversity, but how do you fight through it? And when people say, why aren't you doing this better? You got to believe in yourself. And those things happen. I mean, when I was in 9th grade, I broke my leg. They carried me off the field, straight to the hospital, 5 weeks of traction. So it wasn't always just a perfect ride in sports even. I
Right.
had fun playing sports. I was good at it. I loved it. But even then, you'd come across some adversity. When you're sitting in a hospital room by yourself 24 hours a day for 5 straight weeks, you better be comfortable doing your things.
Right.
They brought me schoolwork, right?
Right.
But